So the news this morning about more travel headaches for anyone wanting to fly out of the country from Gatwick or Heathrow this morning. Gatwick Airport reducing the number of flights over its summer schedule. The boss of Heathrow saying it could take more than a year to 18 months to sort this all out. Horrendous for anyone wanting to get away. What can be done about it?
Well, I think the first thing is that we have to ask our airlines why they don't forward plan. It's not as though people turn up unannounced to get on a plane. They do book these seats many months in advance. Why is it that the airlines have not been making sure they have sufficient members of staff? And I personally think that what they've done is they've shed people, and now they're having problems getting them back because many people have... And the women, particularly it's largely women who check the tickets, are finding that they actually get more money if they work in a local supermarket than if they trek out to Heathrow and check tickets. And so they don't want to come back. So I think that the airlines have to think carefully about that. And when I've spoken to airline staff, and I have, they've said they can't believe that the airlines have been so short-sighted, have laid off so many staff, and now they realise they can't get them back again.
But you can understand the problem that they've had. The pandemic was a nightmare for them, having to shut down so many services, and very hard for them to predict exactly how many staff might be available when they want to restart things and give people the chance to have a holiday.
Yes, I get that argument, but I think that it's also been used by the likes of British Airways. It was a British Airways stewardess I was speaking to, and she was saying that she felt that British Airways had used the pandemic as an excuse to shed staff, and they'd shed far too many, and now in crisis. But I mean, that was what I'm just repeating a conversation that I had with somebody who wanted to talk to me about the chaos in the airports.
So you put this all on the industry. Do you think the government could do anything about this? What would you do?
Well, I think that if I was Transport Minister, I would be sitting down with the airlines and saying, what is the plan? How are you going to get through this? And what can we do to help you? Because we need to make sure that we have a transport industry that works properly, that our airports work as efficiently as possible. You can't have people waiting for hours for baggage, or indeed people waiting for hours to get through immigration, or their flights being cancelled whilst they're sitting in the airport. It's not good enough. So yes, I think that it's right for the minister to bring people in and challenge them and find out how they're going to ensure that this doesn't happen. People sacrifice in order to save enough money to be able to go on holiday with their family, and for that holiday to be cancelled at the last minute is simply not acceptable in this day and age.
You say you want a transport system that works.
Yes.
What about the rail system? We're facing huge strikes next week, 3 days of strikes, but a whole week of disruption. Do you back the strikers?
I think that what they should be doing is they should be sitting down with the employers and with government and discussing how they're going to get through this. We have very low-paid cleaners, for example, on the trains who are finding it very difficult to meet their bills. Now, that will happen up and down the country in all sorts of different industries in the near future because of the cost of living crisis, because of inflation. So we need to make sure that we are not encouraging strikes, we are encouraging people to talk. And what we have is a government that is standing back and saying, we're not talking to anybody, we want to just point the finger at Labour and blame Labour as if it's our fault.
Not encouraging strikes, but supporting strikers. Do you support those who are going to walk out next week?
I don't want them to walk out next week.
No one wants them to walk out.
So I'm not supporting them to walk out next week. I want them to talk.
Do you back them?
It takes two
going on strike?
No. I think that it takes two to tango. What we need is we need the unions and the employers with government, because it's very important the amount of government money that goes into our rail industry. We need them to sit down and actually think about how they are going to practically.
Well, you've said that. So would you say to those strikers, do not go on strike?
I would say that any strike is a failure. What we need to be doing is we need to be able to find a way through it together. And we need to set that as a precedent, because this is going to be a crisis that will apply to many industries in the near future, and responsible government would be involved. I mean, one hears that they are bragging about the fact they haven't spoken to the unions since March. Why not?
But it feels like you don't want to take a tough position on this. I mean, normally, wouldn't a Labour Party be very happy to stand up for strikers and say we back them in taking this action?
We want to make sure that we have a transport system that works properly. It does not work properly when relations have broken down so much that people are threatening to go on strike. We need to make sure that our rail industry works properly, and we cannot have a government that simply thinks that their job is to score political points. They need to be in the weeds with the employers and the unions and the workers and say, right, how are we going to deal with this? How are we, given that there's going to be 11% inflation, how do we make sure that, the lady who cleans the carriages loos, is getting paid properly so that she can meet her bills?
It sounds like you want to put this all on the government, but I'm interested to know why you won't stick your neck out on a position on backing the strikers or not. Is the Labour Party just scared of offending some sections of society?
No, I'm taking an overview. So during the pandemic, because so many of the railways are dependent, obviously, on the fares, and people weren't travelling on the trains, it means that many of the railway companies don't have sufficient income. They are using that, much as I was saying about British Airways. I think that they're oversteering in the wrong direction. They're trying to cut back on routes, they're trying to cut back on employees, and they're not prepared to increase wages. That then means that you have to take a strategic view of this, which is what the job of government is. The government should be taking a strategic view of what is best for all of us when it comes to our railway system, and not spending time having a pop at the Labour Party.
OK, let's move on to the economy. You mentioned 11% inflation looming, as the Bank of England pointed out yesterday. So people are facing an unprecedented cost of living squeeze. What can be done about it? We
think that there are a number of things that can be done. We've obviously we talked about the levy that has happened, the windfall tax on energy companies.
I mean, the government's
and the government has started to do that.
It's committed to going further than you suggested.
Yeah, although it doesn't really. There are all kinds of technical problems with it. I mean, for example, if someone was to own 4 homes, then they would get that lump sum, in every single home that they had. I mean, these sorts of things are a problem. There are a number of problems with it, and it's a shame they hadn't really thought this through, and it's a shame they hadn't was more than a shame that they hadn't directed their minds to it much earlier, when we started to call for it at the beginning of the year. But there are other things that can be done. So just like there's the energy companies have had a windfall in terms of their profits because of the prices going up, the government has had a windfall when it comes to VAT. So the government gets a 5% VAT on energy, on the gas bills and the electric bills. We would say that the government should be cutting VAT, and that would also help with the prices of people's bills. They haven't done that. It's one of the things that we've been calling for now for, I think, probably 6 months. So, I mean, we think that would be the sort of thing. The cut to benefits, the £20 a week cut that the government have made to universal credit, we think is wrong, and they should stop that. We think that they should not be introducing the increase in national insurance, which is a tax on jobs. So here is a number of things that the government should still be doing, and they're not.
OK, I want your thoughts on a couple more things, and we don't have very much time with you. We got the resignation letter yesterday of the Prime Minister's ethics advisor, Lord Geidt.
Yes.
What did you make of it?
Well, I thought it was poor Lord Geidt getting to the end of his tether. I mean, what a job. The idea of your job being to keep Boris Johnson honest. I mean, it's just like, it's a job from hell. He'd waited, I think they'd looked for 5 months to find someone who's prepared to step up. And he had to appear in front of a select committee. He had to defend Boris Johnson publicly. I mean, it's humiliating. So, of course, he wanted to go. And my heart goes out to the poor man. I don't know who they're going to get to replace him because, that we have a government who is committed, as far as I can see, to pushing things as much as they can, seeing what they can get away with, and believing themselves to be above the law.
So what do you think should happen to the role? Do you think it should change at all? Should it be decided by MPs generally in Parliament and independent? What do you think should happen?
I don't think this is going to get fixed by having a new ethics advisor. I think the only way that we're going to get number 10 honest is to get a new Prime Minister.
Well, no big surprise for Labour to call for a different Prime Minister.
But the culture comes from the top. When you have a Prime Minister who thinks it's fine to do whatever you like and that somehow or other rules don't apply to them, you then get ministers who start aping it. Ministers who think that they can behave in this way as well, keep pushing things along. That's what they're doing. That's what this government is about. But it shouldn't be like that. We're a democracy. The law is important. You should not be just thinking you can do whatever you like and somehow or other it'll be fine.
And we should talk about what you wanted to talk about today. There's so many other issues that I did want to put to you, which were of great interest to everybody. But you have written a letter to Boris Johnson today about support for rape survivors. Tell us what you're asking for.
Well, along with 98 Labour women MPs, we're really worried about the changes that are being proposed to what can be disclosed to the defendant in a rape case. And they're watering down the rules, as far as we can see, on the rules on whether or not, if a woman goes to get therapy and there are notes made, we're really worried that they're making it easier for those notes to be disclosed to the defendant. And given that only like 1.5% of rapes actually end up going to court all the way, we can do without it being more difficult. And many women will essentially be faced the choice of, do you want to support the criminal justice system? Do you want to see the guy being brought to justice? Or do you want to look after your mental health?